Welcome to your Walt Disney World Dream Vacation. You know, there's a lot to do here, so you're thinking, what to do first?
Your attention, please. Last call for the Walt Disney World Railroad. Now departing for a grand circle tour around the Magic Kingdom.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently holding for further traffic clearance.
Here's the deal. This is my family, and we are a bunch of landscapers, and more importantly, we're a band. We are Mulch, Sweat, and Cheers!
Hold on! Rock and roller coaster!
WDW Radio, your information station.
Hello and welcome to the WDW Radio Show, your Walt Disney World information station. I am your host, Lou Mongello, and this is show number 420 for the week of September 20th, 2015. I'm here to help you have the best possible Disney vacation experience, and I want to bring you a little bit of Disney magic wherever you are with this podcast, my videos, blog, live broadcasts every Wednesday, live events, my books, audio tours, and more. You can find everything over at WDWRadio.com. Plans for Epcot always included a space-themed pavilion, and when Horizons closed in 1999, those original plans became a reality when Mission Space opened in that location. This week, join me for a comprehensive look at the history of the pavilion, as well as a detailed walkthrough of its story, tributes, the attraction, and post-show. So when you hear the words, go for launch, you'll definitely want to hang on. I'll then have the answer to our last Walt Disney World trivia question of the week and pose a new challenge for your chance to win a Disney Prize package. Then stay tuned to the end of the show for information about upcoming Meets of the Month, including October's and other special events on the road, as well as lots more, and your voicemails. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of the WDW Radio Show.
Activate DSI telescope and begin download.
Welcome to the International Space Training Center. You're here today to train for the greatest adventure in the history of mankind, the exploration of deep space. So when you hear the words, go for launch, you'll definitely want to hang on.
Tomorrow's Horizons are here today. That line and message was one of my favorite and many others' most cherished and missed attractions in Walt Disney World, Horizon. An attraction that opened exactly 1 year after the park's opening date. It really gave us a glimpse into the future from both early visionaries to modern scientists. But for many, early excitement waned and the lines weren't very long, and I think interest and trends in entertainment consumption changed. Sponsors came and went, sinkholes popped up here and there, and ultimately, many attractions like Horizons closed, as it did on January 9th, 1999. But our desire to learn more about and explore space never went away. And really, early concepts for Epcot Center included a space pavilion, so it made sense that after Horizons was demolished, a clean slate was prepared for what was to come. And that new vision was going to take us from the past into the future as together we journey aboard Mission Space. So this week, we're going to explore the pavilion and the attraction in depth in a DSI Disney Scene investigation. And joining me again is a man who's often been described as a space cadet. He is Ryan Wilson of the Main Street Gazette.
How's it going?
Good, man. How you doing?
Oh, really good.
Cool. So, yeah, like I said in the beginning, I think a lot of us, the nostalgics and the sentimentals and the romantics, we miss Horizons for a lot of different reasons. But as things change, and I think as tastes evolve, like I said, the lines weren't always very long, but I think there's always been this love and this interest and a desire for a space-themed pavilion. And we were saying, early concepts for Epcot had ideas for a number of different types of space pavilions in it.
Yeah, it definitely did, and I think you're right. I think Horizons tried to touch. We've talked about before where Horizons was really the encompassing of all the pieces of Future World in those early years of Epcot Center, but that space piece, that what's the next horizon, what's the next exploration, was always there, and they did. We had there were space pavilions and this giant space vehicle that would have lived out in Future World that would have really rivaled the size of Spaceship Earth.
Yeah, it was interesting to sort of look back on some of what that concept art was of, like a spacewalk kind of thing, and sort of a colony up in space, and what the space pavilion might have done, and some of that early concept art, like much of the things that unfortunately never get built, is beautiful. And you wonder what may, no good idea ever dies. But, when Horizons closed, it just made sense to continue in this concept of what a potential space pavilion was going to be, and obviously utilizing new technology, and obviously a very, very different type of ride system as well.
Definitely. I think that's what the ideas of this exploration that we had inherent in, whether it was the pre-art for Space Pavilion or in Horizons. It took that theme from Horizons that really wasn't found anywhere else in Future World and said, this is where we need to go. This is where we need to take these next steps, and cultivated those ideas that were inherent in both Horizons and the Space Pavilion that really stuck to the mission of the space theme, no pun intended, and took that next step.
Yeah, and I actually did. I don't even think I called it DSIs back then, and maybe I need to revisit the pavilion, because we did a show on number 12. We covered a really detailed look at Horizons, and I've had a chance to interview George McGinnis and talk a lot about it. And I think, Ryan, one of the things that differentiated what Disney was doing with Mission Space, not as opposed to Horizon, but Horizon sort of had the Jules Verne, H.G. Wells-esque vision, and then sort of a wide-eyed blue sky vision of what the future might be in terms of space and sea and desert farming and exploration. But here, they really wanted to be authentic. I mean, they worked very closely with, real NASA scientists and astronauts and advisors. And this pavilion, I mean, they developed it over a 5-year period with using 650 Imagineers with more than 350,000 hours, which is about 40 combined years, creating this attraction. And that goes to the technology, the history, the really sort of future thinking, in terms of what was the future going to possibly look like. They consulted with NASA to say, is it possible to have something like this X amount of years in the future?
Absolutely. And they used that timeline to kind of set the story for what we would get in Mission Space. And they also went to them and they talked to them about sciences that did exist currently that they were using for, next generation spacecraft, next generation space program ideas, and things that they believed were possible and that they could touch upon and use. And even if it was just a nugget in a on a screen somewhere that you could use to say, yes, this is real world tangible effects, and this is where we're going to see it in another 20, 30 years. And so let's go ahead and integrate that into our storytelling, into how we build this attraction, so that it does stand up to all the outside lenses.
Right, and I like the fact that, they didn't sort of take a Star Trek, Star Wars approach to, you're going to go through hyperdrive and eventually be there. Yes, there's hypersleep, but they were looking at things like, aerospike type engines and solid hydrogen fuels and some of the different, like you said, real-world technologies that they're just starting to scratch the surface on, wondering what the potential of those might be. So you've got this 5 years of development of the attraction. You've got 2 years of construction, which is, look, Disneyland, I still don't know how they do it. They built Disneyland in a year, and this pavilion takes 2 years, and they have a soft opening in mid-August 2003. And then later on, October 9th that same year is when the attraction finally opens to the public. And I remember a lot of the excitement back then when this attraction was coming in, because it did talk about new ride systems and new technologies and something unlike we had ever seen before. And we can even sort of start from the outside in. As you started to see concept art of the exterior, Horizons was a very geometric, hardline type building. This was very, very different. as soon as you sort of started walking up to it.
It's more fluid, it's more natural. You have those, but you have those kind of, those patterns you see when you watch a rocket launch, those curls and those maneuvers that you would recognize that are intrinsic into the design of the pavilion. And I can remember when it was being built, wanting to take the monorail through Epcot just to get a bird's eye view, just to see what was happening down there.
Yeah, and it's so funny because when you start to look at the details that Imagineering puts in, we know that everything is about story. Everything is there for a reason. So when you first start to see the very radical design of the exterior, you wonder why. And then when they say, well, look, the reason why these lines are curved is because it's meant to symbolize flight and orbits. All of a sudden, the light bulb goes off, and you're like, I get it, right? And you look at the pathways, and you wonder and they're orbital pathways and celestial bodies that are sort of embedded into the concrete. We're obviously going to talk about some of the tributes to Horizons, but actually on the outside, they actually left the planter that was originally part of where the Horizons marquee was from, and it sort of has that similar kind of geometric shape. You sort of talked about looking from the top down. They didn't really touch it very much during construction. I think that was a very, very, very subtle tribute to the attraction, which was there beforehand.
Definitely. It's almost like that reflection. If you look at the planter, it almost looks like the shape of the Horizons building, but in reflection. So you're coming up almost from the backside to the front. So it's like the shadow of Horizons of what was, and now you're stepping into, the next phase and the new thing in Mission Space as you enter Planetary Plaza.
Yeah, and I think what I like about this too is, we talk so much about the pre-show and the attraction and the post-show, and I think Planetary Plaza is, scene one. The queue really does begin outside because it's very striking in terms of the large spheres that are in front of the building. Obviously, it's Jupiter, Mars, the Earth, and Moon, and there's some really neat things that they did and incorporated and sort of fun trivia facts about that. So, for example, when they were coming up with the design of Mars, they mocked up 100 different shades of red, 100 different colors in order to decide on what should be the color that's going to dominate this facade, right? What's going to be the color that's the most attractive and reflective, yet still maybe similar to what the planet represents. You think that they just sort of, go to Home Depot and pick a color palette and that's how they do it. But that's the kind of minute detail, in terms of the color choices. So it contrasts and complements the other colors around it.
Yeah, and if you get up and close to it, you can see it's really iridescent. There's more than one color in there, and they looked at it under day conditions, night conditions, how they were going to light it, so that they knew what they were going to see all day long, every day, and how it was going to stand up and how it was going to pull you into the center and focus you in on that attraction.
And you don't realize how massive these spheres are until you get close. I mean, Jupiter, which is the largest one, is 16 feet in diameter. But, I try and make, I think so often we're rushing to attractions that we skip all the cool details. I think that you need to spend a couple of minutes and look, for example, at the model of the moon outside. And I know I've taken my kids and friends' kids, and you show them the colored markers on there because they obviously have historical importance and significance, right? They all represent the 29 unmanned and manned landing sites achieved by the U.S. and the Soviet Union between 59 and 78. So there's one red marker, that's the Apollo 11 landing, and then the manned missions are in blue and the unmanned missions are in clear and white. And I know the first time I took my kids there, and I need to take them back now that they're older, I wanted them to sort of appreciate when they look up in the sky and they see the real moon, like, we've gone there, like we've stepped foot on this thing, and what an amazing, feat this is.
Absolutely. And you start to think about it, we haven't done it really in most of our children's lifetimes as to see the moon, to talk about that history. And I think the plaza as a whole is one of those areas because there is so much of it in direct sunlight, there is so much of it in that direct Florida heat that people don't take the time. But it's definitely worth the investment of a few minutes, whether you're looking at this, the quotes on the walls that are from astronomers and philosophers and astronauts and presidents and poets and Buzz Lightyear that are all along that wall that are telling you the story of man's connection to the moon and our exploration of it. And then you have the paver for the Mars rovers. And there's so much here to explore that you need to take those few minutes.
And I know, we talk a lot about educational opportunities in Walt Disney World. You have been an educator of children for many years, and I think this is one of those places you don't even need to step foot into the attraction, and you've got a great opportunity to teach kids, or maybe yourself, about the history of space exploration. I think this pavilion very much embodies that sort of infotainment concept that we hear talked about for so many years.
I definitely agree. I think it's, and it is, like you said, you don't have to walk inside. There's all this history. There's all these presences just outside this pavilion. And especially being in Central Florida, being so close to the Space Coast, when I was a child growing up, near Tampa, the space program was this huge thing to me. And this is like one of those baby steps. This is one of those introductory kind of experiences to get people more interested.
And what I think is neat, too, is it's a great, and we'll talk, we'll see in the queue about sort of, again, more of the educational opportunities and real-world science and real-world American history and current and potential future history. But it's also a great combination of fact and fiction, right? Because there's a backstory. Like, once you get into that exterior part of the queue, instantaneously, when you start seeing those quotes, you are starting to be transformed. That you go through this sort of portal that you don't even realize, and all of a sudden you are not only immersed in a story, but like when you walk into Main Street USA and you go back in time, here when you walk through, you go forward in time. Right now, all of a sudden, it's not 2015, it's 2036, right? A very significant year. It's 75 years after Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space. So they pick dates, again, that are important. It's a frame of reference for your kids, and it's about really this thing that now in 2015 we're starting to talk about in real life, colonization of Mars and an international space training center that's going to prepare us for that journey that we or our kids or our grandkids are going to be able to do aboard this deep space shuttle, again, propelled by some of those technologies that we're working on. So it's a very seamless transition from history and current technology into future, fact/fiction.
And now you're occupying this role. You are a trainee. You've come into the ISTC to learn your craft and to be prepared for this next step. As you see, the history of things as it unfolds in this pavilion. There's already one deep space mission out there for the X2, and now you're training to actually be the colonizing crew, the people who are actually going to land and make this next colony on Mars.
And that's the thing that's cool. We'll talk about the queue and the attraction, but this idea that you're in a training facility, and for all of us little kids that watched the movie Space Camp and wanted to go to Space Camp and become astronauts, this is probably what it's really like. And I've seen my kids sort of the first time they went on, their eyes kind of widen, like, wow, I wonder, is this really like what the astronauts go through? So I think that's it's a very much of an attractor for both adults and kids. And you've talked about the fact that it's a training mission. I think we should have to take a second, because even before you go in, you have a choice to make in terms of how you want your training to be. Now, when the attraction first opened, there was no choice. Now you can choose less intense, green team, or more intense, orange team. And depending on which you choose, you're given sort of the appropriately colored ticket. And if you look at the tickets too, one of them says caution, one says warning. Like, we're just letting you know, more intense is more intense. And when the attraction first opened, more intense was the only intensity level that was available. But I think, they started to make changes and understanding that some guests were having some motion sensitivity issues. They included an accessory inside your space capsule should you need it. And I think they realized pretty quickly, based on how people were reacting, that not everybody's not just able to tolerate it, but wanted to have that type of intensity. So I think in early 2006, I think is when they introduced the less intense green training.
Yeah, it came out in May of 2006. Which even that is surprising it took that long. It's surprising that they didn't have the air sick bags when they started. You would think, because everyone did want to experience this attraction, and so it's a matter of, everyone dreams about tomorrow and where we're going to be, and so it's a matter of making it accessible to as many guests as possible.
Yeah, and it's a smart move.
Yes.
For those guests that are, questioning, hey, is this something real? I mean, first of all, you can see what the vehicles look like from the outside. It's something that Disney started doing a number of years ago, and is very, very smart. Don't make a guest wait in line, get up to the loading area, and then go, whoa, wait a second, this is really not going to be for me, or I'm not going to be comfortable in here. The fact that they have the vehicles out there like they do at Everest and a bunch of other locations as well, I think is a smart move and is a comforting thing for a lot of people that may be questioning whether or not they should ride.
It's absolutely true. My dad is one of the reasons I have this big love of Disney and space program both, but he's never been on mission space. He's very claustrophobic, and I've gone and I've shown him this ride vehicle, and he's like, yeah, I'm not getting in that. And I'm like, right. And so for all these years, he's just lived vicariously through my stories of it. But it is, and it's very smart so that he has that option rather than get up there and then go at the last minute, go, nope, you know what, I'm going that way. So
yeah. Yeah, because look, I understand. Sometimes, you want to know what you're getting into before you go in, right? Tower of Terror is a great example because you can look up and go, you know what? Maybe not for me. I'm going to sit this one. I'm going to sit this one out. You don't really get a chance to see that on Mission Space. You see the vehicles, but you don't sort of understand this idea of the centrifuge and the spinning individual vehicles themselves.
Right, and I think that's one of the reasons that now not only do you have the two options, but you also have cast members out there, and you have more than just one cast member standing there, so that they have time to interact with guests and explain what they're getting into a little bit more in depth, so that they have that kind of everyone has that threshold in their mind of where they know they can go, and this helps them decide for themselves.
Right, and obviously this is an attraction that has a height requirement. It's 44 inches high to ride, so I'm hoping that in the next couple of years I'll actually be able to ride Mission Space for the first time. But it's and I think Disney makes accommodations. There's a lot of benches and stuff outside because they know that this may be more, like a Tower of Terror or Space Mountain is one that there's a good chance that some family members or parties in the group might want to sit out. And if you are going to go, I mean, you could split, your group can split up, they're going to separate the mild and the more intense group.
Right.
Because they do sort of work in sort of different launch bays, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Yeah, and you always have that choice, and and they have the single rider line so that you have people can fill in the gaps where need be. But there are a lot of smart decisions that have gone on since Mission Space is open to make sure that it is accessible to everyone.
And Ryan, with the changes and the modifications and the improvements to things like Fast Pass, it's making it so much easier for guests to skip the lines and just walk right through. And I will tell you that there's a few attractions in Walt Disney World. I think Expedition Everest is a great example, where I think that at least once you should go through the queue. You should take some of the time and go through the queue. And I think that Mission Space is another example. And people are like, Lou Mangello, what are you, crazy? I just want to get to as many attractions as you can. But I think there's some really neat details in there. And I remember the first time I walked in, and you're very much like me. We stop and we look and we take thousands of pictures. But I dig, again, the real world, current and historical artifacts that are in there, right? So you see this giant rotating artificial gravity room, and I love hearing, my kids go, well, why is that? Why are they doing that? Why is it sort of this hub and spoke, and why is it's spinning? And I say, I don't know, and I look it up on Google on my phone, and then I explain it to them. But they see, and I'm like, this is how you live in space. And then look, kids, look right in the center there. Do you see the Horizons logo? And they're like, what?
Wait for it to come around. It's upside down right now. It'll get there. But no, you're right. This is one of those attractions that I when I go in, I'm upset when there's a short line because I want to take time. And then I end up doing things like backing myself away, letting people pass so that I can read all the pieces and look at stuff. And it infuriates people who are trying just to get on the attraction with me. But there's so much. You can see the gravity wheel, and you can see that there are rooms set up for different activities, so that's how they would live and they would move and have some semblance of this artificial gravity that would be created. And then you turn, and there's this replica of a lunar rover up above your head, just sitting there, like it's ready to race off at any moment.
And what I dig about that is, that is a real lunar rover, right? It's on loan from the Smithsonian, and according to Imagineering, it's the only lunar rover that is currently not on the moon. Like, if you want to see a lunar rover, you go to Epcot or you go to the moon. it's slightly cheaper to go to Epcot, depending on what ticket that you
those
get.
are your options at this point.
But,
and there are very few seats available to the moon right now.
Yeah.
So,
well, we'll see. Richard Branson and Elon Musk are going to change that. We're all going to be going.
I said right now. Yeah.
But when I see something like that, and I tell my kids, like, that lunar rover is as old as I am, and that's when they go, "Wow, man, that thing is old." But and they see, when our kids think about space travel, they think about Star Trek or Millennium Falcon. But when you see that very long, model of a rocket, and on the end is what would be that rotating living quarter section, you're like, yeah, if we were to go to space now, this is what it would probably be like. This is what we think it needs to be like right now. So I really like giving them a little bit of the history and sort of seeing that wide-eyed idea. And look, like I said, as a kid who always, I think in between wanting to be like a priest and a fireman, there was an astronaut, phase in my childhood. So this, I know, is as close as I'm going to get.
Yeah, and I think that's for me as well. I've always threatened my wife that if they ever open up, a trip to go, I'm going, and the looks I get are a little bit incredulous anymore these days. But it is. I think that for in possibly my lifetime, at least in my ability to make that kind of a travel lifetime, this is as close as I'm going to get, and so I cherish these moments.
And on the left side of the queue, this, like I said, is where it sort of completes that transition from history to fictional storytelling, right? Because you see those plaques continuing, sort of marking different milestones in history. It starts back with Yuri in 1961, and it ends in 2036, present day, with the crew of Bobby O'Brien and Sumi Yamamoto and Frank Rodriguez. That, like you said, is the crew that's out there already. And I will tell you, one of my favorite things, and like you, this is where I need to stop and take pictures and let people walk by. I love that command area, right? Because that's sort of what we see on TV. But man, the thing I dig most about that, and this is where, like you said, we get the funny looks from people. I'm like, wait for the bird. They're like, what? I'm like, you see that itty bitty, teeny tiny monitor over there? Look for the silly bird like falling down on the runway, because that's a tribute to Flight to the Moon and Mission to Mars, very much the precursor for Mission Space.
Right, and it's one of those great little details in there. For me, it's still back on the timeline where you had the first family in space. That's the Wilsons. I feel a connection there. And don't even get me started on trying to explain Skylab to young visitors.
Skylab.
But it's in there. But you're right. There's always, this is that next step in evolution. And even when I was going back and looking at all the stuff for the Space Pavilion, and you think back, it's mission to the moon, mission to Mars. And then this is that next step, and it's a much bolder step, but it's a more realistic step for us.
Yeah, and it's it's neat how it goes from being somewhat of a museum in the queue to the real working, launch control center for the mission that we are about to undertake.
Yeah, and you start seeing all these small monitors and all these giant boards full of switches and lights, and it starts to become a little bit more real as to all the things that have to line up for any of these missions to have success.
And I'm going to tell you, man, I am not too embarrassed to admit that the first time I rode this, maybe the first few times I rode this, I was like giddy as a schoolgirl. Not because I have this bromance with Gary Sinise, but when you get into that first briefing room, you're like, this is what, space camp was going to be like. Like you were really sort of buying into the idea that you are getting ready to undertake what potentially is a real sort of training simulator that astronauts are undergoing right now.
And as you're in there, it kind of the only thing I can really liken it to is it's almost like a locker room, right? You have all of these individual cabinets for the individual space suits that are in there with the different roles, and it almost looks like you're like gonna open these these metal mesh lockers up and start putting on your uniform, putting on your spacesuit to get ready to launch.
And because I'm such a nerd, do you ever ride and, they go through, commander, pilot, navigator, engineer, and I'm like, oh, man, I want to be the engineer this time. Like, let's switch places. Not that it matters in the grand scheme of things, but, I think I'm fighting with my son sometimes.
I've done that to more than one person. And actually, because I go with people who sometimes don't really quite understand, I tend to just line myself up appropriately so they don't realize what I've done to them rather than switch. But I make sure I know that I'm in the right spot for where I want to be.
Yeah, my son will go, oh, I want to be the pilot. Okay, if you want to be the pilot, I guess I'll be the commander. No, I want to be the pilot. I want to be the commander. I'm like,
no, you said pilot. I'm going to be the commander, And then there's always that one person you're with who's grumpy because they're the engineer, and they're like, great, I got the low-level job. What happened here?
Yeah, like, Mommy, what does an engineer do? Listen, engineers are very, very important. Yes. You need to hit the button. Just don't forget to hit the button.
Just pay attention to you pay attention. When it lights up, hit the button.
And did you notice in the safety video, do you notice the person that pulls the restraints down, the woman who pulls the restraints down, is also in the safety video from Test Track?
Oh, I hadn't caught that.
No. Learn
something new.
Ever see that? Drop the mic and walk off stage. There you go. All right, so let's talk about the actual attraction itself. And when you walk up to those vehicles and you see that the sort of the whole front of the console is going to enclose you. I think that's where a lot of people sometimes have some concerns about being sort of an enclosed space. But they do some really subtle things in terms not just of lighting, but they blow fresh air in there. And you correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that there's, especially in the more intense, that there's a hint of peppermint because supposedly it helps with motion sickness.
Yes. Yeah, there is. And it definitely, and it's also the way they set the monitors up, so it's not like you're looking straight at a screen. It's a window to a mirror to a screen to you, so that it's not quite. It looks a little bit more realistic to your eyes, so that it keeps that depth perception, that distance there, so that you're not quite realizing what's actually happening physically to your body.
And I challenge you, Ryan P. Wilson Matua, and you, the listener, to sit down. And when the console closes and you're strapped in and the restraints are down, not to start flicking switches and pressing buttons and grabbing the joystick because you
never gonna happen.
Like, I love that, man. Like, I love that part about it. Like, that they don't do anything, but you're just having fun, like reading them and wondering what they would do and looking at the little maps. Again, it's those little attentions to detail and the fact that we're still a tactile people. We want to touch things. We want to play with the buttons and switches and knobs.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of going in there with my my little camera trying to get pictures of some of these to try to figure out like in a real program, what would that actually be used for? And because you want to know what it's going to do. You want to flick the little switch because it has that resistance, so you feel like it actually is doing something when it's probably a little metal plate on the other side that just makes the clicky noise for you. But it feels real in that moment, especially when the dim lights are on and it's you're encapsulated. You have your belt and you're locked in, and it's like, yep, okay, I'm really launching somewhere.
Well, and that's the thing that this attraction does. And I remember the first time I rode it, like, I think I was not expecting the level of intensity of the liftoff. And when you go through that slingshot around the moon, like, you feel the G-forces. Like, the G-force is like 2.5, right? Mm-hmm. So that's, imagine that the force is 2.5 times that of gravity on the surface of the earth. So you feel it, like you feel it pressing against your chest. And again, for me, like, that is that little bit of physical pressure is very exciting because you don't necessarily get that on, the TTA. Like, it's another level of intensity that I think makes this a lot of fun.
It's one of those things that actually, to even really understand how great that force is and to how to understand it, you almost have to do the attraction twice. And you need to do it once on the intense level and then once on orange and then once on green, so that you understand that pushing that button when you're in the 2.5 Gs and the stress you actually put your arm through to actually get there and push the button, there's a fair amount of resistance. Whereas when you're doing the less intense version, you can just easily reach your hand out and pop the button. So it's almost worth that experience, doing it that way, so you get that differentiating experience.
Yeah, and I think it's unlike anything you can feel on any other attraction in Walt Disney World, because, again, of the uniqueness of this multi-arm centrifuge, right, that has these 10 training modules on it. So on the more intense side, the centrifuge spins, right? That gives you that sense of weightlessness and gravity and the force. Whereas on the less intense, they use motion simulator effects that are also used on the more intense side. but the centrifuge doesn't spin. So that, I think, is where they found that some of the discomfort issues were coming from. But I think you're right. I think trying to experience it, if you can, both ways. I mean, my kids do more intense training. They got the courage up after seeing how easy it was on the green side. They say, oh, yeah, all right, let's try it and see. And then you find one that you're just more comfortable. Look, I wouldn't tell you to go do more intense training right after you had Electric Umbrella and a Starbucks and do it 6 times in a row. Probably not the best idea on the planet or other planet. But you know what, too? When you walk in there and you see that and you realize that there are, all these different bays, this from a guest capacity, I think it's 1,600 guests per hour. Like,
yeah, 1,600.
They move a lot of people through this attraction.
Yeah, I mean, you consider it's a little less than 4 minutes when you're actually in you're actually in your little launch pod. You're getting 10 people and you're getting 40 people in there per ride, 4 bays per at a time. So yeah, you have quite a bit of capacity there, and it's one of the things that keeps the line down, which is to our chagrin when we can't stop and look at all the cool stuff in the queue.
So I think we need to talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that's your Capcom, Lieutenant Dan Taylor, also known as Gary Sinise. I love Gary Sinise, man. I know, maybe he's not everybody's cup of tea. I loved him in The Stand. I loved him as Lieutenant Dan. He's your Capcom during the pre-show, and I think he adds a really neat element to the attraction itself. Obviously, of course, as every Disney attraction goes, you launch, you go around the moon, you go to hypersleep, and then something goes horribly wrong, and you are forced to wake up as you're getting ready for your descent and landing on the Martian surface.
Yeah, and I think there is something though with Gary Sinise there, and he's constantly walking you through the experience. But we all recognize him from Apollo 13, and he did a movie called Mission to Mars. So he has that authority kind of on the subject that you're like, right, I'm totally in capable hands. He's not just an actor. He's been there. He knows whether that's what you should be thinking is not. But right, you get your slingshot around the moon, and you go to sleep, and you wake up because there's debris in your way, and you have to figure out how to navigate yourself down to Mars.
No, I know he was in all the space movies, but every time I hear it, I'm like, but you ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dan. Like, that's what's going through.
You got new legs, Lieutenant Dan. I think for a lot of attractions, there's that one sort of takeaway line, the line that you always remember, and it's that, don't move a muscle. Now, my only question is, look, Mars is still a pretty big place. You've got all these places to put a landing strip. Why do you put it right at the end of this giant chasm? Right. like, did anyone look at this map of the topography and go, oh, you know what? Some of that's going to be frozen and melt at some point. Like,
is real estate that expensive on Mars? Like, that's the only place you could find.
It also has that feel like now with the Star Tours Adventure Continues. I always feel the same way when I'm on Hoth. It's like, did you guys go to Mission Space and just go, oh, that was fun there, let's put it over here too? Because I have the similar feelings when I'm on both parts.
But I love, the more times you ride it too, and again, you want to play all the different roles in the cockpit. Although, and look, it's that sense of interactivity. I think Mission Space continues something that Horizons really started. This ongoing and evolving trend towards interactivity in attractions. We love Horizons not just because of the smell of the orange groves, because at the end, we could help choose and direct how that story was going to go. When you pressed one of those 3 buttons in your vehicle, right, you had some sort of say in how it went. Here, obviously, the story, it's always going to end well, whether you press your buttons or not. But this sense that it is a much more interactive type experience, I think that's what we, as consumers, especially the next generation, we don't necessarily just want passive experiences. We want things that are going to push the limits and, more importantly, let us feel or actively participate in the story itself.
You're absolutely right. And I've been on the attraction where there was another couple with us that wasn't in our party. It was just that they ended up. It was my wife and I and this other couple, and they really weren't paying attention throughout the entire experience. And all of a sudden, the ride gets going, and it's telling this woman to push this button, and she starts freaking out because she's like, "What do I need to do? What do I need to do?" And she's screaming at her boyfriend. He doesn't know anything, and I'm just like, "It's Disney. It's a ride." And then the computer override comes in and automatically engages it for her, but she panicked, and it kind of gives you that sense of, right, this does have that real world feel to it. You have that interactivity, and she has an experience she's never going to forget because she forgot to pay attention in the pre-flight video.
Right, and I remember riding with my daughter once, and she's like pulling on my leg and my arm. She's like, Daddy, I didn't hear what he said. What am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do. And I'm like, don't worry. She's like, no, don't tell me not to worry. And I'm like, and you love and we sort of laugh at that childlike innocence that I wish would just stay till she's like 45 and finally allowed to start dating, possibly. But it is that thing because, again, these attractions are made not just for the adults and the nostalgics, but for the kids as well. And when you hear that innocent enjoyment, and I say innocent fear, but you know what I mean, like that they buy into what that experience is. Like if I was the person that designed the attraction, I'd be like, yes, that's what you want. You want
that's what I want.
Yep.
Yeah, you have that. You get that real world adrenaline rush. You have that real, that there's a tangible sense of urgency to what you're doing. And you've completely bought in. You forget that you're sitting in a centrifuge in Epcot. You're literally launching yourself to Mars, and you for those few moments, those 4 minutes, that is your world.
Yeah, and another trend that I think this pavilion as a whole is starting to follow is one that we see elsewhere in the parks, especially in Epcot. I think of Spaceship Earth. There is no, the joke has always been you exit out into a gift shop, and eventually you will. Don't worry, you'll get there. But in between the attraction is sort of that third act of the play where now you've seen the pre-show, you've experienced the actual attraction, and now in this post-show area, you go into an advanced training lab, and now if you want, that adventure can continue. And I think the smartest thing they did was they made sections and areas for different interests, different intensity levels, and different ages. Like the fact that in that little space-based thing, it made me think of those. What were those things when you? Not that I ever had one, but I remember in the 70s and 80s, if you bought a gerbil, there were the yellow tubes, and the kids. What were they called? The habit trails. They were habit trails, right?
Yes.
So, you put your kid in a habit trail and let him run around and expend some energy, and mom and dad can sit down in an air-conditioned environment. But you can also do, postcards from space. Like I love, obviously, maybe in 2015, it doesn't have the appeal that doing the attraction open because it's all on your phone. But, you make these little videos or photos. You can email them back to people at home. But I like the Expedition Mars and the space race, right? So Expedition Mars, you sort of do this computer simulation where you're searching for lost astronauts. But Mission Space, sort of takes up the entire right side, lets you become a part of a team, and coordinating with cast members and different players, you get to sort of partake in this outer space type adventures as though your simulation and your training was still going on.
Right, there are pieces of this where you're still Capcom now. Like now you're working on this side of things, and you're helping a mission, and you have different roles, and you have, that's an incredible, it's just incredible experiences entirely in that post-show queue. You think about the 3-year-old who's never going to, not going to meet the height requirement for a couple of years, while their siblings are on there having their mission. There are pods in that space base that look like control panels for, another spacecraft. So that 3-year-old is essentially getting their flight experience as well. And it's just for whatever piece you want. And Mission Space is one of those pavilions that, because there's such a quality of experiences throughout the pavilion, you can really add on some time and really explore and get in depth and really immerse yourself much, much more.
And the cool thing about the space race thing is in the attraction, when you're pressing the buttons and the knobs, nothing happens, right? You're not going to change the course of your space vehicle. Where on the Mission Space race game, you really are, right? You're sort of on this space station orbiting Earth, and you're competing to kind of reach the space station and do all different kind of fixes. And you can either win or lose as an individual and as a team. And do you remember when it first opened, and I went looking, and unfortunately it's not there. When it first opened, you were actually able to play not just against the other team that was physically there, but you were able to play versus people who could sit at their computer online. They had a mission space race online aspect to it. And that really sort of added not just a neat element in the sense that even if you weren't at the parks, you can sort of be participating with people who are there. But I think it added a little bit of unpredictability to it as well.
I think it definitely did, because it was, it made it a much larger scope of the project, a much larger scope of the game. And, now with internet speeds as fast as they are, those home teams would have been just as dangerous as you would have been sitting there in the room and taking part in the experience. And it reminds me a lot of, I did space camp when I was in high school as a part of a science class that I was involved in, and it has that very real world feel that you get the same thing as if you were at Kennedy Space Center. It's just as on point. It's just as exciting, and you get immersed in your team and and pushing people to win and making sure that you're doing the exact right task at the exact right moment.
So wait a minute, I have to stop for a second. You went to space camp?
Oh, I knew that was coming back. I knew that was. Oh, tell the geeks early. No, I had a science class in high school. I was in an astronomy class, and we actually got to go and visit NASA as a team of. There were, I think, 12 kids in the class, and we went to go, and none of it was comfortable because it's all made for younger kids. But we also got a little bit more to get behind the scenes a little bit more than they typically let the other kids. So it was that was an experience.
I so wanted to go to space camp, not because I was always interested. And I remember as a kid going to the Kennedy Space Center with my parents on our frequent trips down to Walt Disney World. Also because I had a crush on Kate Capshaw and Leah Thompson and Kelly Preston.
And they weren't there when I was there. I tried to. And they wouldn't let us anywhere near the space shuttles. I don't know why.
There was actually a lot of famous people in that movie, right? Yeah, Tate Donovan, was it? Joaquin Phoenix? John Locke, better known as Terry O'Quinn, was in there too. I have to watch that movie again.
I was gonna say, it's one of those movies you go back and look at, and you're like, wait. You forget how much just fun it is to watch that movie. You have to go back and watch it. Yeah. I don't want to be disappointed by seeing it now. So it's not like it's one of those movies I think does stand up. I mean, it to time. I think I haven't seen it in a couple of years either, so I probably need to rewatch it. But like Kate Capshaw and Kelly Preston themselves and Leah Thompson, Space Camp also stands the test. You know what? Like a fine wine, they all get better with age. Now it's getting a little creepy. All right, let's back to the post show. Back to the post show. So you do eventually go into the shop. You go into the Mission Space Cargo Bay Gear and Supply Store. What I like about this is, oftentimes, especially now as locals and my kids, you go on an attraction and you kind of quickly go through the post show and the shop. Because you've seen it so many times. But Mission Space is one of the pavilions where there's some merchandise, and I like this about it, that you can only get there. And again, you come off the attraction, and especially I saw it in my son, they start getting this somewhat of an interest in space exploration, and they start looking at the books, they start looking at the space shuttle toys, and I like that about what it is. It's not only just, T-shirts and outer space cotton candy, but there are some educational toys and stuff in there as well. Yeah, you have the toys, you have the books that actually give you a little bit, it furthers your story. It explains a little bit more. It gives you a much more fleshed out vision of what space exploration has been and will be. And it is, you're right. There's so many pieces to look at there that it is one of the more unique shops you go through in terms of what you can get, although the space ice cream is not, horrible. Right. Yeah, I mean, look, I think every time I go, my kids want to try another space-themed food product. Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, sure, you don't want to go to, World Showcase and just go to Mexico instead. But, I like the do you remember when they used to have
the Mickey and was it Goofy who was out there like in their futuristic Aaron Gray, Buck Rogers spacesuits doing some meet and greets outside there?
Yeah, it was, and it didn't last as long as it should. You would have thought that's a key area for that. Like, this is future world, this is space exploration. Let's keep this going, and it didn't last nearly as long as it should have.
And I haven't been on in a while. So is there was another Horizons logo in the by the cash register.
I could say right below the cash register is a blue background, and then the way the lines and everything intersect, it looks like the Horizons logo.
I'm gonna have to do so. That actually that'll beg the question. So I just called it Horizons. Is Mission Space for you a must do, an occasional do? You've done it once. Like, how does it sort of rank for you in terms of repeatability factor?
I think it has a high repeatability factor because there are so many different experiences you can have within a singular attraction. It's not necessarily something I do every trip. Like I said, my father's claustrophobic, so when he comes, it's definitely a no-go. And my wife doesn't have a very much fondness for being in there. And even if she's not being spun around in circles, she still feels like she's being spun around in circles. So for me, it's typically an every other trip kind of a thing. But I always find a way to stop by the pavilion and kind of check out the Planetary Plaza or go in the gift shop, and whether it's looking at the merchandise or looking for the Mickey Nebula in the ceiling, I try to find a reason to kind of visit at least.
And I think it's one that, barring physical and health issues, and be very mindful of what those potentially might be. Barring that, I think it's one of those that you have to look. I believe that you should try every attraction once, right? You can't say that you don't like it until you've done it, because you might surprise yourself. I think there's a number of people that sometimes have to almost be coerced or bribed to go on, and they come off and are like, "Oh, I loved it. That was great. Let's go ride Tower again. I want to do Everest, or I'm afraid to do Space Mountain because it's dark inside." And then once you do it, and the fact that you can do the less intense first, it sort of lets you dip your big toe into the water of the attraction.
Yeah, definitely. It's like the preview version. It's testing, especially if you're coming in with somebody who's maybe a little bit older. Their health isn't quite what it wants. What it used to be. This gives them that chance to one, experience it, but two, to kind of, for everyone to kind of go give it that once over of, okay, yeah, I've done this, and you know what, that's not for me, or okay, I want to try more.
Right. So let me ask you this.
Oh, here it comes.
If they said to you, Ryan, you can have Mission Space, or we're going to knock it down and rebuild Horizons exactly the way it was before, using the exact same technology, right? You can't upgrade the technology. You can't upgrade. It's sort of just, boom, Horizons comes back. What do you do?
Oh, I love Horizons so much. I think without technology upgrades, without giving it a new, the fresh coat of paint, as it were, I think Mission Space fits better into a one pavilion, one theme. This is the next step for tomorrow. I think some of the ideas in Horizons, one, we've already gotten to, or two, we've realized are not as feasible as maybe another idea. So I think if we're really looking at Future World as the next step for mankind, I think Mission Space is more in line with what we need to be seeing in Future World than my beloved Horizons, and that hurt a lot to say.
I could feel right, because you're conflicted, right? There is the nostalgic, there's the romantic. Look, you close your eyes and you hear the Horizons music in the background, and you hear the little boy going, "Mom, what happens if Napoleon flies away?" That was the worst little boy impression ever, but you get the point. But you're right. You say, well, is it just sentimentality that makes me feel that way? And then you wonder, well, if Mission Space goes away, this is probably some kids. This is the ride that he's growing up with or she's growing up with, and maybe they would be sad and going, wait, you took out Mission Space for this? I'm playing devil's advocate, but I want to ask you, the listener, that question. You have a choice. Mission Space as it is, or disappear and instantly bring back Horizons the way it was on opening day in 1983. Leave your answers. You can tweet me at Lou Mongello, Facebook.com/WDW Radio. You can call the voicemail at 407-900-9391. Let me hear your passion in your voice about which one you want to keep or bring back. And then, as always, when you're done, go and visit MainStreetGazette.com and show Ryan P. Wilson Matua lots of love. You're also at Main Street Gazette on all of the social, and you got lots and lots of good stuff on social and on the blog as well.
Definitely. And make sure you're tagging Lube and noticing that he didn't answer the question himself. He just put me on the spot and then all of you on the spot.
Dude, come on, man. Don't
oh, yeah, that was going to go under the radar this time.
Don't throw me under the Land Rover there.
You threw me under the Land Rover, so turnabout's fair play.
I got to think about this one. So, very cool, brother. Look, we have a lot more to get to. We've got more DSIs, more Wayback Machines, and probably some dining in our future too. So, thank you, brother.
Always a good time.
The greatest journey of all time for all to see. Every mission makes our dreams reality, and our destiny begins with you and me. Through all space and time, the achievement of mankind, as we say.
It's time for our Walt Disney World Trivia Question of the Week, where I invite you to test your knowledge of Walt Disney World history or see how well you pay attention to the details, not just in what you see, and sometimes, like last week, in what you hear. If you think you know the answer, you can enter via email for your chance to win a Disney prize package. Before we get to this week's question, let's go back, review last week's, and select our winner. So last week was one of those "Where in the world have you heard this?" questions, and your quote was,
"Where do you think you are, Disney World? Get your strollers in line and..."
I love going back in time and revisiting some of the extinct attractions of Walt Disney World. So do many of you, because again, hundreds of you entered, got this one correct, because you know that was some of the adventures of Buzzy in Cranium Command at the old Wonders of Life Pavilion. Congratulations to all who got this correct. I randomly selected one winner who was playing for a prize package that included a WDW Radio Magic Band cover, 102 Ways to Save Money for an At Walt Disney World book, and my new audio tour of Tomorrowland. And last week's winner, randomly selected, is Faith Thomas. So Faith, congratulations. I'll get your package out to you right away. If you played last week and didn't win, that's okay, because here's your next chance to enter in this week's Walt Disney World Trivia Challenge. So I said that I liked the extinct attractions and history. We were talking about Horizons this week and Cranium Command in last week's question. Well, let's go back to Horizons again. We talked about it. It piqued my interest again in the attraction. So your question this week is simply to tell me, what 3 destinations could you choose at the end of Horizons, right? You were able to choose your own flight path back to the future port. What were your 3 possible destinations or ways to get back there? You have until Sunday, September 27th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern to email your answer to contest@wdwradio.com. Again, you're playing for the WDW Radio Magic Band cover, a copy of the 102 Ways book, and an audio tour of tomorrow, both of which are available at wdwradio.com. So good luck and have fun. That's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you again so very much for taking the time to tune in this and every week. Your question of the week this week is to tell me, green or orange, or go grab a snack, which is your preferred way of experiencing Mission Space? The green side, the orange side, or just not going at all and eating while your friends or family go ride the attraction? Share your answer with me on Twitter. I'm at Lou Mongello, Facebook.com/WDW Radio. Leave your comments there. You could also call the voicemail at 407-900-9391. Let me know which you prefer. Just say hi or call from the attraction itself. Quick thanks, as always, to some new members of the WDW Radio Nation and family, including Lori Cripple, Josh Wilner, Ed Alley, Thomas, Justin, Jay Clark, and Michelle Parry. Really do appreciate the support and the love and the friendship. And if you want to help the show and also receive exclusive rewards, including monthly scavenger hunts, access to our private Facebook group, custom personalized Magic Band covers, logo gear, t-shirts, backpacks, care packages from Walt Disney World, exclusive video group calls, and lots more, you can visit wdwradio.com/support. Completely optional. Great way to support the show and get some cool stuff in return. And don't forget that a portion of your proceeds also go to the Dream Team Project to benefit the Make-A-Wish Foundation of America. Again, to join the nation, visit wdwradio.com/support. And in addition to the podcast, which you can subscribe to over on iTunes, please join me every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern for WDWRadioLive.com. I talk about this week's Walt Disney World news with you and answer your questions in the chat room live on video over at WDWRadioLive.com. I also do it via Periscope. So if you're not following me on Periscope, I am at Lou Mangello there. I simulcast the live show every Wednesday on Periscope. Also do a lot of broadcasts from the parks. Thanks to everybody who joined me for Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party and our walk through the Magic Kingdom last week. Again, that's at Lou Mangello. Also, I'm at Lou Mangello on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. I'm really at Lou Mangello on all the social. Also, please come by the website at wdwradio.com. We have a great team of like 30 blog writers producing some really fun, interesting content on the blog. We have new videos. I just posted a new snack of the week, possibly my favorite one ever, over at the Golden Oak Outpost. We have a free newsletter, app, and lots more. If you have a question you want answered on the air, email me, lou@wdwradio.com, or call the voicemail 407-900-9391. And as much as I love connecting with you online and on Twitter and email, I think that nothing beats a handshake and the hug. That is why I do monthly meetups in Walt Disney World. Thanks to everybody who came to the food truck meetup at Downtown Disney. Our next meet of the month is going to be Saturday, October 10th, over at Disney's Hollywood Studios. I chose Saturday, October 10th at Disney's Hollywood Studios for a very specific reason. It is the last day that Mulch, Sweat, and Shears will be performing live on the streets of America. Don't know exactly what their schedule and timetable is yet, but they have been here for just about 11 years and want to sort of help them say goodbye with all of you. So it will be Saturday, October 10th, in the afternoon, most likely. Don't know the exact time and exact location we'll meet up yet. Stay tuned to the events page at www.radio.com and Twitter and Facebook for more details as we get closer. Also, while you're on the events page, check out some other events that we'll be doing in Walt Disney World, on the Disney Cruise Line, and around the country. We have our 9th anniversary cruise on the Disney Fantasy. It's one of the Star Wars days at sea, February 6th through the 13th. Our New Orleans meetup and race, February 26th through the 28th. Chicago, I'll be there the week of July 8th. And November 4th is the beginning of our e-ticket adventure in New York, from New York, on the Disney Magic, ending in Puerto Rico. And of course, we'll be at all of the different Run Disney events. And if you want to be part of the running team, you can visit www.radio.com/run. I'll also be doing other meetups, not in Walt Disney World, and on the road as I'm traveling the country, really the world. I'll be going to the Philippines next year. Speaking at conferences and schools, I'll also probably doing a meetup in Fort Lauderdale, Florida at the end of October. I'll tweet and post more about that. And if there's any way that I can help you or your school or your business by coming to speak to you, or maybe help you individually turn your passion into your profession, you have empowered me to do that. I want to give it back. If there's some way that I can help you with personal mentoring or group coaching to help you build your brand and build your business and do what you love and get from where you are to where you want to be, visit LouMangello.com. Thanks as always to Mouse Fan Travel, my official and recommended travel provider. Really, because it's who I use, it's who I love. They have done an exceptional job of exceeding expectations and giving you the best possible prices and all available discounts at no cost to you. They're over at mousefantravel.com. Visit celebrationspress.com to get Celebrations magazine delivered to your door or your digital device. Also, be sure and check out Swan and Dolphin Food and Wine Classic. My favorite event of the year is the Swan and Dolphin Food and Wine Classic, Friday and Saturday, October 30th and 31st. It is an amazing 2 days of unlimited, let that sink in, unlimited food, wine, beer. There's seminars, entertainment, celebrity chefs, lots more. Again, that's Swan and Dolphin Food and Wine Classic. And as always, my friends, and you are my friends, whether we have met yet or not, all I ask is that if you like the show, please help spread the word. Let others know about it. Tweet out that you're listening. Share links and comments. It's so helpful over on Facebook. And please go to iTunes and rate and review the show there. Thanks to you, we have more than 1,000 five-star reviews. Would love to keep them coming. I want to thank some recent reviewers, including Mick T. Burke, Fly Girl Court, Quirty, 3.141592565, LT Nabet, and my friend Omar Zenholm from the $100 MBA show. You can visit wdwradio.com/iTunes to find out exactly how to rate and review the show. And finally, and most importantly, I just want to say again, my sincerest thanks to you. I appreciate you so very much for taking the time to tune in. I know how valuable your time is and how little you have, and the fact that you choose to share and spend some with me means a great deal, and I appreciate you for that. And like I said, I want you to feel as I do, to do what you love every day. So if there's something that you want to do, if there's a challenge, a goal, a dream, whatever it is, when you've got that mountain that you need to climb, start climbing it. Waiting isn't going to make it any smaller. So start taking steps, however small they might be, and you will eventually get there. Have faith, and like Walt said, always keep moving forward. Thank you again so very much. Have a great week this week. So until next time, see ya.
Hey Lou, this is William Tollefson calling from Seattle. I just got back from my Walt Disney World vacation. I'm the one who came up to you at World Showcase while you were live broadcasting and pointed at you and then shook your hand and thanked you there for all I did. I wanted to let you know that my girlfriend Charity there, who I had with me, that was her first trip to Walt Disney World, and she had an amazing time. And we have another convert on our side. Thank you for everything you do, Lou. It was amazing to meet you, and I really enjoyed the show. We'll be in contact.
Hey Lou, this is Austin from Seattle. Just wanted to supplement your top 10 list from this past week. Really enjoyed it with the common mistakes that visitors, both old and new, make at Disney. And I just wanted to provide the suggestion that you don't really have to spend big money on big ticket items to necessarily create the memory. I don't think that Bibbidi Boppidi Boutique is necessarily the way to go to create those everlasting memories unless you like pixie dust in your luggage for the next 5 years. Or other events, although they're great, I don't think they're necessary. And I think really the best means to create those lasting memories is really the spontaneous events, like the character meet and greets that appear and suddenly there's 9 characters and no line, or the moments that you have while pin trading with cast members and interacting with them. These are the memories that my daughters remember. And although we've done some great things, those are the ones that seem to come up, and thankfully they're also the least expensive. So I think that's something that a lot of travelers can really benefit from, thinking that they're going to have to go for broke to make this really a lasting, fun memory for a lifetime. But sometimes it's those little things that are just as meaningful, if not more so. So there's my 11th suggestion for your top 10 list. Look forward to hearing from more. Thanks.
You've got a friend in me. Yeah.
So when you hear the words "go for launch," you'll definitely want to hang on.